Hi, my name is Mark Sanchez. Welcome to City Talk. Tonight we've got Timothy Cameron. He's the 2218 M.A.D. recipient of the Victim Impact Panel's Speaker of the Year Award. Timothy, welcome to City Talk.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for being here tonight.
You.
Would you like to tell us how you got involved with M.A.D.?
Sure. That was because I heard a M.A.D. speaker in 1990. I believe it was November of 1990.
Mm-hmm.
I was fresh in recovery, so I was getting ready to receive a 3-month award for being sober. And they usually at our M.A.D. recognition, at our sobriety recognition events, we had speakers come in. Mm-hmm. And it was usually people in recovery themselves, people who had sobered up, and it was an exciting time for me. I had not been sober 90 days ever, except for like maybe right after I was born or something. You know, that's how
it's a hard accomplishment.
Quite a
sometimes.
span, yeah. So,
yeah.
But and I was really excited to receive a 3-month medallion. That's the little award they give people, you know.
Right,
and
right.
But when I saw that they had slated a speaker from Mothers Against Drunk Driving by the name of Mary Jo Robinson, I was taken aback because I had this preconception that anyone in M.A.D. was going to speak about a tragedy, about losing a loved one. And it would be a painful experience to hear a M.A.D. speaker talk about that. And I just couldn't correlate how anyone would invite a M.A.D. speaker to a recovery event celebration. And I was replaying a tape in my mind that was manufactured by me. Right. And I was experiencing a thing called contempt prior to investigation.
Right.
I had never heard this woman utter a single word, but I'm playing the tape in my head. Some people might call contempt prior to investigation prejudiced, sure. You know, prejudice. Yeah. If you really get to know someone, take the time to actually have a conversation with them, then you can say something personal about the person. But until that point, all of the exterior things in our lives are meaningless. And we oftentimes judge people by the exteriors, by the information that we are fed. And I had a memorized emotion, and it went straight to negativity about M.A.D. And I was just waiting for the speaker to start talking. Why is she here? I'll have to put up with this, but I'll get through it, sort of a thing. Mm-hmm. And then she introduced herself. She said, "Hi, I'm Mary Jo Robinson, sober by the grace of God, 21 or 22 years at that point." And I could have did a V8 commercial on my forehead. Here, this woman is one of us, and I had excluded all of the other possibilities. And caught myself being closed-minded. And I needed to step back from that, and when I realized it, and I thought, oh geez, okay, I shouldn't have done that. But then I started to listen, not with just my mind, but my heart. And it's a really good thing that I opened my heart, because her story changed my life. It redirected the course that I was on in a way that I would have never guessed would transpire. Yes, she did talk about losing a loved one. Her son, Mark, same name as you. Glad you're here, brother. And but Mark was hit head-on by a drunk driver on Highway 94 in St. Paul. If you know the Mounds Boulevard area,
yep,
94, yep. There's this long curve that comes around right where he was impacted. And Mark was coming back from the airport. 5:15 in the morning is when he left the airport. He collided head-on with the alcohol-impaired driver at 5:30. The alcohol-impaired driver also left at 5:15 from the kegger he was at. He had just celebrated graduation from college, and he hadn't drank in 4 hours plus, and he thought he was okay. But he wasn't. He made an alcohol-impaired decision, got on the highway going the wrong direction, and collided with Mark head-on, killing him instantly. So yes, Mary Jo talked about that. However, she didn't go into any of the grueling details, thank God, you know. I mean, that's tough enough just even hearing that.
Right.
Now, the part of her story that opened my heart with love and forgiveness was when she shared how she conducted herself in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
At the opportunity we are afforded in the state of Minnesota, if you're a victim of crime, you have a legal opportunity to make a victim impact statement. And she intended to give hers and was looking at the guy that killed her son, who was positioned across the courtroom behind his lectern. She's behind her lectern, and she wanted this young man to look at her when she gave her victim impact statement. You know, you have a right to say how the crime impacted your life, and the offender is required to listen to that before sentencing.
Okay.
And he was not happy about this situation, obviously. Who would be? I mean, he didn't mean to kill Mark. He didn't plan that. But he
Right.
also didn't plan not to. He didn't mean not to. And that's where being conscious about what we do is so important before we're going to party.
He's still responsible
Yes,
for it.
yes. He is now paying the ultimate price of having killed someone. And so he's on that side of it. And he didn't look at her when she asked him to. So she asked a second time. And he still couldn't bring himself to do it. And, you know, I don't think he failed to look at her because he's a bad person. I think it's just because he had all this guilt. He was feeling horrible.
I bet.
You know, who could look at a mom after killing their child? It's like, I can't handle this. And Mary Jo, however, wanted him to look at her, not for some, you know, guilt fest. She wasn't there to hold up a blame thrower, you know. She needed him to see her eyes, is what she explained to me later. She says he needed to see my eyes because the eyes are the windows to the soul. And she was a Christian counselor for a great many years, and she knew people well enough to say, if they don't see you say something, they might not believe it. It's like just a theory. But if they're looking in your eyes, you get past all of that, you know, that judgment stuff. And but he still didn't look at her. So Mary Jo broke a rule. She got out from behind her lectern and started to cross the courtroom. And you know how courtrooms are. Judges are
They don't
pretty
allow that
fussy.
stuff.
Yeah, judges are they don't want any possible harm coming to anyone in a courtroom, and if a victim is going toward the person that killed their loved one, that's usually a huge red flag, you know.
Deputy will get up and stop
Sure, the judge will signal the bailiff or say something, but the judge did not signal the bailiff and just let her keep walking toward him. Now, Judge Campbell was officiating that day, and I've talked to him, and he said that the reason he wasn't worried about it, he had been in chambers with Mary Jo a number of times. He knew the direction she was going with this. There was no threat to his safety. So she continued to approach this young man, and however, his mom, who was in the audience, sitting as close to him as he could for support of her son, gave Mary Jo a look. When their eyes connected, Mary Jo said, you know, this woman had daggers in her eyes, and she was transmitting a message to me, don't you hurt my son. He knows what he's done. He doesn't need more because of you. But she couldn't stop and explain it to her, you know. She just approached that young man, asked him again to look at her, and he still couldn't do it. So she reached out, placing her hand beneath his chin, respectfully, by the way, no force, no imposing anything. very gently and asked him again, would you please, son, would you please look at me, was the word she said she used. And he allowed it. And she raised up his face, and as soon as their eyes connected, she said, I want you to know something. I want you to know that I love you and I forgive you for killing my son.
Wow.
Yeah, and that hit me so hard. It's like I never knew that a mother could ever say what she just said to the person that killed her own son. And she loved her son. It wasn't a fly-by-night relationship she had with him. She loved him. And later I asked her, I said, how is it that you could even do that? How could you say that? And she said, 1, I'm in recovery. 2, I'm a Christian. And both disciplines require forgiveness. We teach forgiveness. And now that life is really difficult, I still have to do it. I can't let this go unforgiven. So, guess what happened to him when he heard those words? I love you and I forgive you.
Started crying.
He started crying, yeah, you know, and I look at tears as not a painful thing. For me, I look at tears as holy water. You know, it cleanses us. It gives us an opportunity to in a beautiful way, or to release that pain. And their tears come out and it siphons off some of the pain from our heart. But the impetus behind his sobbing, racking, sobbing tears was the act of love and forgiveness by Mary Jo. And at that point, she stepped around his lectern and she put her arms around him and hugged him and held him as he cried uncontrollably in her arms. And she just kept repeating those same words. I love you. I forgive you. I love you. I forgive you, over and over and over, until he stopped sobbing. And as soon as he stopped crying, she stepped back, she looked at him again, and this time he's looking at her in the eyes without being asked. And she said, I've only got one thing to ask of you. If you have an alcohol problem, all I ask is that you do something about it. Please don't let my son die in vain. Don't let him die in vain. Now, they did a follow-up with this young man. M.A.D.D always tracks people that kill and injure. He's never reoffended. No more DWIs. We've looked at his life a few times through the years. He's doing really great. You know, there's many measures or signs that a person is having a good life, but he got married, had several children, is holding down a high-paying job, same job for a long time. I mean, he's doing great, you know. So I really think what Mary Jo did for him that day also helped free her, you know. And what I mean by that is, like, Mary Jo, one, she said, we forgive regardless of the temperature of our hearts, you know. A woman that hid Jews in the concentration camps was there because of that act of treason, I guess, if you will, in Germany in World War II. And Corrie ten Boom was her name. And she said that in the concentration camp, and we forgive regardless of the temperature of our hearts. And Mary Jo took that. She says that's what we do. And she also said, you know, when someone wants to get well, we got to let them. There is not a human being on the face of this earth that has a right to be an obstacle to a fellow human being getting well and healing. If they want to get well, we got to let them. You know, and it's my opinion that if we become a barrier to a person being in a healthier place, if we become a roadblock or even a speed bump to someone getting well because of our judgment. You know, our country is addicted to judgment. you can't go anywhere without seeing it. But you can also see equal measures of love and forgiveness in our world, right? Both exist. But I tell you, I really think our country is addicted to judgment. So our first inclination isn't necessarily to forgiveness. Yeah, it's justice first and then mercy after the sentence has been served, you know? So, and I think a person has to be responsible for their actions. There has to be consequences. I get that. But when we hand out that justice, we also do it with love, though. If we do it without love, truth without compassion is cruelty, you know. And we don't have a right to be cruel. So that was her explanation as to why she did it, you know, big picture. And that just really inspired me, and it also helped me open up. This is how my first M.A.D. contact happened. You know, now I'm out of judgment mode. I didn't see M.A.D. as some evil institution trying to destroy everybody that it has ever driven under the influence. And I told her that in 1977, August 15th to be exact, I drove under the influence and I too killed someone's child. It was a 6-month-old baby by the name of Timothy Wilburn, who I ran over with the car I was in. I was alcohol impaired, I wasn't drunk. I had 3.5 beers that day. But I was in a drinking and drugging lifestyle, which oftentimes means I would go a day, 2 days, 3 days with little or no sleep. I would push myself beyond normal human sensibilities. I mean, who does that? Unless you're an addict or there's something seriously wrong with you. You're insomniac or something, that's different. But you know, and this day I paid a huge price, as did a lot of people, you know. When little Timmy's mom, Sherry, and her sister, Susan, were out for a walk that day. They were enjoying this beautiful weather, this nice time together. Sherry was pushing little Timmy's baby stroller, and then I came around the corner, saw them, tried to avoid hitting them, but I still made an impaired decision because I was sleep deprived, and even though I had 3.5 beers, it was still enough to impair my judgment. I screwed up, and I tried to avoid hitting them, and I made it worse. I spun the car sideways, fishtailing it, thinking that I could drive behind where they were walking, and it was impossible because I suddenly turned the wheel to the left and the car spun out of control. The back end of the car went up into a yard on the right, left 2 tire marks in the yard. Police did a lot of drawings of this. They didn't have, but they didn't have photographs of most of the stuff like that. But they did take pictures of the stroller. And but I came into the street sliding sideways down the street, and I'm in a station wagon. This is taking up almost the whole street now, and I'm thinking I'm going to hit both of these women. And I desperately tried to straighten out the car, knowing if I could at least do that. I mean, this is some quick thinking going on. If I didn't take up the whole road, maybe I wouldn't hit them. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea how I did this so quick, Mark, but I got that car straightened out. And I was coming toward both of these women, and I did not see a stroller because of how I was sitting in the car, I guess. That or I blanked it out. I have no idea. Saw no stroller. And I looked at these women, and I said a little prayer to God. I said, God, please don't let me hit them. But the prayer came too late. And Susan ran to safety right at that time. And then I looked right at Sherry. Her eyes connected with mine. We looked in each other's eyes. And I remember thinking just before impact, why in the F doesn't she get out of the way? And then I hit her with the right front side of the car, impacting her hip. She went up into the air, back down on the ground. And she had to tell me this part. It wasn't even in the police reports for whatever reason. I ran over both of her legs. And after I ran over her legs, or while, I heard this low, gravelly crunching sound of metal on metal, which I didn't even know what it was. I thought maybe when the car was sliding sideways, the jarring of the car shook off a muffler or something. I had no clue what I was hearing, but I was hearing that baby stroller underneath my car. And, you know, that's not a sound you easily forget, you know. I don't see how anyone possibly could forget that sound. You know, if you're watching a classic car chase where the cops and the crooks are doing the deal, and the special effects in a high impact movie, you know, Fury or something, the cars might even go airborne, and then the chassis hits the asphalt and sparks go flying, and you have this low gravelly crunching sound underneath their cars of metal on metal. And most of us hear these sounds and it's exciting, it's CG and all the things that attend it, and it helps sell movies, and we're sitting on the edges of our seat. But most people don't hear that the way I do. Reason being is because most people still have their innocence, you know. But once that innocence has been taken in the way it was in my life, you don't hear those same noises again. I went to a movie like that after I sobered up, and now I got nowhere to hide. You know, I can't hide in a drug, I can't hide in a bottle of booze, and I had to feel everything. I had to go through everything. And
PTSD.
yeah, oh, there was so much PTSD in my life, it was insane, you know. And not just from this either, growing up abuse and the like. I had a lot of issues, you know. But I shared with Mary Jo that I'd killed little Timmy, you know, and I gave her just enough of a framework of what happened, and she said, Timothy, oh my gosh, we need you in M.A.D. I want you speaking for M.A.D. And I right away said, no, that's not going to happen. I'm not a speaker. And, you know, I just think that would be too much. I mean, why would I want to tell people that I killed a child? What good is that going to do? All people are going to do is hate me. And they're going to think I'm some despicable human being, and I'm going to get covered with judgment. And then, of course, what's worse, I got to face feeling it myself, you know. And
reliving it.
yeah, so I didn't even want to think about it, much less, you know, talk about it. So,
right.
and Mary Jo explained something to me. She said, you know, hold up a second. Here's the deal. One, when we're in recovery and we are asked to do service work, we don't get to say no. We say yes. That's our standard. Secondly, consider this. What if your speaking would help someone not do what you did? What if it saves a life? What if it changes somebody's life? What if there's someone that's in that audience that has an alcohol problem, and they might look at that and do something differently? And she had me, man. She had me there. It's like, oh, I see the sense of that, and I'm still trying to squirm out of it, though, you know. I said, I'm willing to try, but I don't think I can do it, you know. And she said, well, come to a M.A.D. panel. Just listen and see what you think. And after the M.A.D. panel, decide then. So I said, okay, I can listen. So I went to this M.A.D. panel. It was in December of '90. And everyone that spoke on that M.A.D. panel, their stories paralleled my life in ways that were mathematically precise. There is no way that this was just some kind of a freak accident, that this person's story paralleled my life so exactly, and this person and that person. Just one example is that there was a young man speaking on the M.A.D. panel by the name of Timothy Budig. He was in the car when his dad was hit and killed in that vehicle. He was injured quite sorely. He had a scar from his esophagus down to his navel, and they had to cut him open, you know, to save his life. And he showed us his scar, you know. And the reason that his name is Timothy is like, well, yeah, so there's a lot of people named Timothy, but he was 13 and a half years old, and I did the math. Had little Timmy survived, the child that I hid, he would have been 13 and a half years old at that time. His mom also spoke, and they talked about the history of an organization that their dad and husband was in. It was the same one that I was in, you know. And there's just everyone that spoke. It paralleled my life in such a personal way that what I saw is God's writing on the wall. That's the words that occurred in my mind. This is where I'm supposed to be. It's really clear. I'm supposed to be speaking for M.A.D. Didn't mean I was any less terrified, but I knew that this is what I was supposed to do. So I told Mary Jo I was willing to speak, and started speaking in January of '91 and have been speaking ever since. But I got to tell you, that first 8 years of speaking was excruciating to me. I hadn't forgiven myself for killing little Timmy. It had not really crossed my mind that I ever should forgive myself. I should carry this burden forever. And I had this grief in my heart that was getting activated, and I couldn't escape it. And I wanted to escape it, but it wasn't going away. And every time I spoke, it got more and more difficult. And I remember experiencing this feeling of driving home after the M.A.D. panel over and over and over again, feeling like I wanted to kill myself. I wanted to get my car up to 100 miles an hour, press my foot to the accelerator, hit the floorboard, and go as fast as I can, hit a tree or a bridge, and kill myself, and to prove to people how sorry I was for killing little Timmy. I mean, if there was any doubt in their mind before, now they know, you know. And really, it was one of the hardest things that I've done in my entire life to not kill myself in that fashion. And when the feeling wasn't going away, I finally got honest with Mary Jo. I didn't tell anybody else. I didn't tell people in M.A.D. I thought they'd kick me out of M.A.D., and I didn't want that to happen. And when I told Mary Jo how I was feeling, she said that I was suffering from low self-esteem. Excruciatingly low self-esteem, she explained to me, you know. And she gave me as an assignment a thing that's called mirror therapy. Some people are aware of it. The short explanation, she said, Timothy, I want you to look in the mirror every morning when you get up. You don't pee, you don't have a cigarette, you don't get your coffee, you don't make a phone call, you do nothing. This is the very first thing that you do, is you feed your mind this message by standing in front of a mirror, point at yourself, look yourself in your own eyes, say your own name out loud, and say, Timothy, I love you. And you do that, she explained, every day until you mean it. Then you can stop. And frankly, I thought it sounded kind of silly. Mm-hmm. You know, it sounded like some fantasy project she wanted me to embark on. I was thinking, oh, this seems so stupid. Yeah. Pardon me?
Pop psychology or something.
Yeah. Pop psychology, good one. And so I didn't summarily dismiss it. I didn't say I'd do it and I wasn't going to. You know, I respected her. She had gotten my attention, so I agreed to try it. I said, yeah, I'll give it a shot, you know. And the next morning, I looked in the mirror and I explained to myself exactly what I was supposed to explain to myself. I said, Timothy, I love you. But when I did it with that sense of obligation, you know. Probably had my shoulders slumped a little bit, and I'm thinking on the inside, oh, this is so stupid, you know. And I go, Timothy, I love you. And then I had a visceral gut reaction. And Mark, I started cussing myself out. I said, "You're a scumbag. You killed someone's child driving under the influence." And I thought about being abused as a child, and I thought, there's something wrong with you, that you were abused. And I blamed myself somehow. It's like sometimes people blame the rape victim. They might say something ridiculous like, "Oh, you weren't dressed right," or "You asked for it somehow." I'm sorry. That's not true. That's a lie straight out of the depths of hell. And we should never believe a story that doesn't empower us, but the people that hurt us, they want us to believe that stuff, so we stay silent, ashamed, don't repeat it, and certainly don't expose them. But if there's any part of it where you're blaming yourself, how are you going to get out from under that? And until you can make peace with the fact that it happened and forgive how you feel about what happened to you, you're not going to understand forgiveness, And there's something really powerful about forgiveness that I really hope listeners would lock this idea in. Forgiveness always runs deeper than the offense which requires its presence. Forgiveness is greater, more powerful than the thing that led us to it, which was the offense. So yes, indeed, we forgive regardless of the temperature of our hearts. Now, easier said than done. Much easier said than done. And it's a long process for some of us. Sometimes it happens spontaneously, miraculously, but it's usually a kind of a spiritual education of the heart that transpires over years. Sometimes we go to a therapist and we work on that. And there's so many ways to deal with this. But I realized, and I don't know how long I was cussing myself out in the mirror, when I suddenly realized that I was doing that. And I felt like I was a loving person as well as I could be. Yeah, I had some issues, but I would not have treated anyone else the way I was treating myself at that moment. If I saw someone being talked to in the way I was just talking to myself, I'd interrupted. I'd stop and say, you don't talk to people that way. It doesn't matter if you're right or if you're wrong. You just don't treat people that way. But I was doing it to myself. I had given myself permission to play that tape that I had installed, and that was installed within me, and I allowed it to be installed, and then I kept it alive. It's like if somebody hurts you, right? And you're 40 years later, you haven't seen the person and you're still mad. It's like, hello, they're not paying rent in your head. You're the landlord, you're the CEO of your life, so eject them. File a lawsuit, get them out of there, do what you got to do, but evict them,
Sometimes we treat ourselves worse than we would let somebody else treat us.
Amen. Yeah, and I didn't know that I was treating myself so poorly, but it became an outward reality to me, and I had enough recovery in me to know that this is a huge no-no. We don't do this. And I also realized Mary Jo nailed it. I've got low self-esteem, and and in the moment I did. And there's a saying that I have is that God esteem goes further than self-esteem. It's great to have self-esteem, and some people believe in God, some don't. You can call it good orderly direction. I could care less. I have this conception of God that works for me, and my God is a loving God, and God forgives. It's not one that goes around hurting people, and so I'm going to tear apart this this person and I'm going to send them to hell. God doesn't do that. If anyone sends someone to hell, it's certainly not God. And C.S. Lewis wrote that the doors to hell are opened only from the inside. It's an inside job. You want out of hell? Walk out. But yet we play that game. And we're stuck, but we're stuck by our own making. There is no more secure prison in this world than the one we construct for ourselves. And self-guilt and self-recrimination is a very secure prison indeed, but when we're blaming someone else for it, we have given away our freedom. We have sold our freedom to that person who has no power to keep us trapped. It's an inside job. So for 8 years, Mark, 8 years, every morning, I rarely missed a morning. And I looked in the mirror and I said, Timothy, I love you. And the day came when I meant it. And I was shocked, you know. I mean, I did 5 years, 10 months, and 1 day in the Missouri State Penitentiary for men in Jefferson City for killing little Timmy. I pled guilty to the crime of manslaughter. I saw the photograph of the stroller with blood on it, and I just knew there's no way in the world that I could send this mom to a trial to re-experience losing her son. I couldn't do it to her. So I pled guilty and I did time. And, but when I couldn't see the ex-convict in the reflection, you know, I couldn't see the abused child, I couldn't see this kid that had been hurt in so many ways, I just couldn't see anything wrong with me. And I don't know how I could do this, but I thought I saw this white mist around my face that just looked like a sheer peace. And I had to get closer, man. You know, I got close to the mirror and I looked in like this to make sure I wasn't imagining things. And it's like, it's true, it's true. And I got all happy and stuff, you know. And I ran down to share my joy with fellow members in recovery in Maplewood. We had meetings we'd go to. And I got to the clubhouse just before meeting time, and people were out having cigarettes in their little pavilion space. And I ran to the little pavilion, and I got really loud. Okay, is it okay if I say what I actually said at that moment? There's a cuss word.
Go ahead.
I stopped everyone by getting real loud, and I said, check out this shit. You guys are going to love this shit. And they all stopped, right? And they looked over at me like, oh, what's going on with Timothy, you know? And I said, this morning, I looked in the mirror, and I said, Timothy, I love you. And I meant it. I meant it. And they all just kind of looked at me and each other and didn't say anything, you know. And how do you even respond to that, right? But this one woman, I'll never forget this. She took a big hit off of her cigarette, blew a plume of smoke up in the air, looked over her shoulder at me and said, what, are you going to kiss yourself too? Well, no, I wasn't going to kiss myself too, you know. I wasn't mad at her for saying that. I knew she didn't understand. How can you be mad at somebody who doesn't get that? You know, she hadn't been there yet. And I was comfortable with that. Have you ever been in such a good place that you just can't see anything wrong with someone else? You just not, even if you know something isn't quite right, you just don't let it bring you down? I was there. I was there. And it took 8 years of hard work. You know, yeah, I went to see a therapist. Yeah, I went to tons of meetings. I did a lot of service work to help people. I'm still involved with M.A.D. But after that day, I no longer wanted to commit suicide after speaking on a M.A.D. panel. Talk about a huge relief. So that's kind of, you know, my short version of my M.A.D. introduction and the healing process. And I've had a lot of people through the years say that I've helped save their life through my speech, and personally I think they're saving their own lives, you know. I'm in charge of what I say, they're in charge of what they hear. You know, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's not about me, but I at least show up and try to activate love for people to unlock within themselves, because it's always an inside job. And if I can help them walk away forgiving themselves for being there, walk away feeling like they're a little more in love with their life rather than more in deficit for having attended a M.A.D. panel, that to me is mission accomplished, you know.
Are most of these panels people that are court ordered to go to the panels, DWIs
Typically,
and things like that?
Yeah, typically they are DWI, DUI offenders. Sometimes it's we'll go in and bring panels to jails or prisons, and gone to churches and synagogues, and a lot of schools. You know, we hit so many schools. I don't know how many, if we missed too many, you know, in the Twin Cities area. So through the years, we've just and we do mock car crashes, which is really a huge, fun, effective tool that gets the attention of youth in a way that is, you know, really clear. It's stark, and they'll show a mock crash, and students from the school are pretending to be, you know, the driver and the victim, and an ambulance will come. They'll fly in an actual helicopter to copter somebody out away from the scene. So it's a big deal,
wow.
right? Yeah. And the kids, you know, hopefully, we usually do it before prom time, you know, because there's so many kids driving under the influence.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we want to help put the kibosh on that. And then after the mock crash section is done is where we'll speak. We'll tell our personal story. And so most of the people listening in the M.A.D. panels themselves, yeah, they're DWI offenders, but I don't even want to call people offenders, you know. They're just a person that we have a divine appointment with, you know. They're not there because they had a DWI. They're there to get more love and acceptance and mercy and forgiveness and all these things. They didn't expect, they show up for one reason, but they stay for another, you know, because they have a shifting consciousness. Mary Jo shifted the consciousness of the young man that killed her son by saying, I love you and I forgive you, right? He wasn't there to get tortured by Mary Jo. She brought to bring peace, a peace that surpasses all understanding. It doesn't make sense that a mom would forgive.
They're there to receive a message.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that's how I view it. We're there to become one in this healing journey that we call life. Earth School is to help us all. It's not to hurt us all, you know. And I don't want to be part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. So, yeah, that's the approach I take.
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings me to the book that you wrote. You've also written a book, it's called The Little Book of Miracles, Story from the Incomplete Skeptic. And here it is here. You also talk a lot about the solution in here, or your experiences with God. This is a collection, I'd say, about a dozen or so experiences, short stories with of your experiences with God. Let's see, there's one in here, I think it's on page 14, called Rest My Child. There's some pretty intense things in here. You were going through a horribly dark period, and I'll read a little bit out of here. He said, sometimes a person experiences a psychosomatic torture in suffering so dark that one might undergo a complete psychotic break. I now know that in such times we either have a breakdown or a breakthrough. And a little later in that paragraph, at the end, you say, I reached out through prayer. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about this story and how this period of time that you were in?
Yes, I was 16 years old. I was serving time as a juvenile at Lino Lakes. It was a facility for kids that have been in trouble, you know. Mm-hmm. And I was a joyriding car thief back in those days, and I think I was in Lino Lakes about 18 months before I turned 18 and was released. But I spent most of my time in segregation. I was constantly trying to escape. I had the as far as I know, the unbeaten record for failed attempts. You know, I mean, I tried to escape 11 times and failed. No one had ever tried that many times and not succeeded. So I had that record, a dubious distinction indeed, but then the 11 and a half time I actually got over the fence and got away, and but I was back within a couple of weeks because I was drinking and drugging and doing all the same stuff, you know. Nothing changes, and I ended up back in Lino Lakes, right? So I'm doing most of my time in segregation. It's a very lonely world to be in segregation, and you don't have anyone to talk to, you know. And I was dealing with some really serious emotional or spiritual, I don't know how you want to characterize any of that. If you want to do it like a psychologist would, just say he's having a psychotic break, or you do it like a spiritual person who certain disciplines might say that there's more to it than that.
I would go with a little bit of both.
Yeah. But you know, it started out small, and then the problems got worse, you know, and I remember it starting with a baseball. I'd close my eyes to relax, rest, or sleep, and a baseball would be coming toward my face as soon as I'd do that. And I'd be startled, and I'd open my eyes, and then I'd be able to go to sleep, you know, but then slowly but surely the baseball would be going faster and faster and faster, and there would be more of them. And then the baseballs over time turned into knives, and then over time they turned into broken shards of glass, and then I could hear the glass breaking in my mind, and I could feel the blood draining from where the glass was cutting my brain, and I was seeing, you know, images of Hitler beckoning me to hell, and I mean, there was a lot of really difficult stuff that was happening then, and I just was to the point of giving up, you know. I thought, I can't do this. I'm just going to kill myself, you know. That's the only option I have, and I didn't believe in God at the time. I was agnostic. I didn't not believe per se, but and in my last desperate, I don't know, you get an animal that's on his last leg, he's in a trap, and he's about ready to expire, and you know, and instead of, you know, chewing my leg off, I just said a prayer. You know, I said a brief prayer, and I didn't even know it was a prayer. I just said, God, if you're real, please help me, you know. And then I heard 3 words in my mind, but they were real. This is a real, loving voice that said, "Rest, my child." And I immediately fell into a peaceful slumber, and that was after 3 days of having no sleep because of this torment I'd been in, and weeks before that with limited sleep. I mean, this is tough. That I went directly into sleep and then slept probably for 8 hours, and I woke up the next morning refreshed. And I heard this little tinkling of glass in my mind that faded into the distance and disappeared, and I was completely free. And I thought, wow, I guess there is a God, you know, and there's something that loves me, because that voice had pure love in it. And I immediately grabbed my Bible, you know, and I started reading it, and I just felt freedom and love and peace in the air. Everything had just completely flipped for me. And so that was the first time that I heard the voice, you know. And that voice at that time said, "Rest, my child." I've heard it again, but different scenario. But I was totally freed from that psychotic break episode, whatever it is, you know, whatever you want to call it. I'm hoping that if a person reads the story that maybe is struggling in some area of their life that might not believe, give it a chance, you know. I mean, there's nothing special about me. I'm a guy that didn't, you know, expect a certain thing. I just asked for help. And there's a few really powerful prayers. One is, God help me. The other is, thank you. You know? And trying to give thanks in all things, because, you know, there's always a higher message within everything. And sometimes it hides really well because we're in pain, but it doesn't obscure the fact that we were born good enough. We were born perfectly. So we have to go back to who we truly are. Just have a vision of who we really are. And if there's any part of your conception that doesn't believe that, you have to get rid of that, because you are good enough. We all are good enough as we are. And nothing happens in God's economy by accident. In God's economy, nothing is wasted, if you will. And sometimes God is anonymous. God will do the anonymity thing, you know. And I've seen that over and over and over until the person has reduced their prejudice enough and their ego gets small enough to consider the possibility that maybe there is a God.
I like what it says towards the end of the story, and I'll quote it here. It says, "Rest, my child. My experience says to me that, yes, there is a God. I believe God can restore minds to their rightful states. And if we only humble ourselves and pray for help, sometimes we have no healing because we do not ask for it. God waits at that door with love. If you are suffering but do not believe in God, what will you do? Will you give God a chance?" So, this is just really, really great stuff here. Do you have another story in here you want to?
Well, I could talk about whatever story that interests you. You know, I wanted to write this book to bring, I hate sounding like some religious freak or something, you know, but to bring glory to the one that has helped me so much in life, you know. Mm-hmm. And I'm just an echo of things that have been done. I'm just repeating the stories. Mm-hmm. But when I was in prison, Oak Park Heights prison, because I'm a slow learner, you know, I thought maybe instead of talking about the sexual abuse miracle right at this moment, maybe I could just touch on the story in prison where Patrick healed my lungs.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. And there was a gentleman that was in prison and with me, and he was running around the prison. Well, you don't really run around Oak Park too much, you know. It's pretty closed off. But he was going around. The 10th leper? Yeah, the 10th lepers. Yep. Yeah. And I have to shift a little bit here. Sorry. Mm-hmm. But Patrick was a really interesting guy, but I had kind of dismissed him a little bit. He was Christian, mm-hmm. and I believed in Christ, but I was not your run-of-the-mill Christian by any means. You know, I was a racist, and I became racist in prison. I started a gang in Missouri prison where I became a racist, and that continued for a great many years. And I didn't believe that, you know, anyone could pray and be heard unless they were white. That's what I believed, you know. And I even went as far as saying something pretty offensive, you know, and I used to say, and by the way, I want to point out, I've been healed of racism. That no longer exists in my life, but I wasn't healed yet, right? Good. And I used to say, mm-hmm. Prayer couldn't get above the top of a black man's head. And I would mm-hmm. laugh loud. And I meant it, and I believed it. I was pretty messed up.
Right.
And I had some you know,
Prison
that voice.
People.
Yeah, you know. And I thought anyone that was a Christian, they were haters because they hated the haters. And I figure you're preaching against hate, but yet you hate the haters. You're no different than, it's like you hate someone, I hate someone, and literally I didn't hate anybody. I was just angry, and I had been brainwashed in prison. You know, I had been groomed to be a racist. I was 21 years old when I got locked up, and I had met a Mensa certified genius, narcissist, sociopath that brought me into the racist movement, but it took about a year to basically convert me, if you will, you know. And I did not go into prison racist. You know, it was no part of me. But they got a saying in prison, huh? Nobody comes out the way they go in. And that whole facility, I mean, you know, racism was the norm. The cafeteria was divided by race, black people on one side, white people on the other. The Cubans sit over here. It took the Cubans 2 years to even get 2 tables. No one wanted to let them sit anywhere. And they eventually got a couple of tables, you know. And then the natives would bounce around. We only had 2 or 3 natives at any given time, and the like, you know. So racism was very prevalent, and it wasn't being controlled by the system, you know. But I'm still racist in prison, and here's Patrick going around as a Christian doing V8 commercials. Remember I said that earlier? I could have did one on myself. Well, he's doing V8 commercials on people's foreheads going, "Be healed in the name of Jesus Christ." And I never saw one person healed by Patrick, you know? And I thought, this guy's nuts. What is he even bothering? He's not getting any results. Why are you doing this? I don't get it. But I was, in my own condescending way, because I did believe in God, I did love God, but how I, you know, manifested my belief system was just way different than most people. And God still did miracles in my life, even though I was messed up, you know. We don't get ready to meet God. We meet God to get ready. That's the way it works. You know, we don't have to be, you know, try and work our way up the ladder before God hears our prayers. You know, Christ sat down with sinners. He sat down with people that were rejected by everybody else, and they, you know, lambasted him for that. And he says, well, I'm not here for the well, I'm here for the sick. That's who I'm hanging out with, you know. And but I wasn't in that place yet. So I hung out with Pat to some extent. I'd have conversations, but it was all condescending, you know, and very limited. And one morning I walked into a cell. They were setting up for breakfast, and they were late. And he had 2 gentlemen he was speaking with about something Christian. And as soon as I got into the cell, the conversation just went muted. And they changed the topic and started talking about things that didn't really matter so much to them. And then Patrick looked over at me. He says, "Timothy, how you doing?" And I was in a lot of pain. I had been smoking roll-your-owns for a long time. My lungs were hurting for about a year straight, so much that I could barely stand the pain anymore. I couldn't walk upstairs without breathing heavily. I couldn't do the things I used to do, and the constant pain in my lungs is just horrible. And when he said, "Well, Timothy, how you doing?" I just blurted it out. I said, "Oh, man, my lungs are killing me." And I thought, oh, no, this idiot is going to want to heal me now, you know. I shouldn't have said that. And I looked over at him, and sure enough, he was sitting there looking at me, and his eyes got all lit up and sparkly, you know. And he says, oh, you want me to heal you? You want me to heal you? And he's reaching his hand toward me. He had his index finger out like this, right? And as he's reaching toward me, he's starting to say, you know, what he is always saying, "Be healed in the name of Jesus Christ," right? You know. And as he's reaching toward me, he's saying, "Be healed in thee." And I'm waving my arms like this. And I'm trying to bat his hand away from me, right? And I'm backing off, and I'm dropping F-bombs, literally dropping F-bombs. "Don't you effing touch me. Get the F away from me," you know? And then my back hit the wall, and, you know, it's not a lot of room in a cell, you know? My back hit the wall, and as soon as my back hit the wall, my hands went up from the momentum backward, And just as soon as my hands went up, his finger touched the center of my chest. Probably just hit your mic there. And right when he said, Christ, be healed in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. And as soon as that finger touched the center of my chest, it was like 10,000 volts of white light electricity left his fingertip, went into my lungs, enveloping 100% of the entirety of my lungs. Just went whoosh, and then all that white light electricity, and that white light was brighter than the sun. And that white light exited and took out everything instantly that was wrong with my lungs. It was gone. Bam! Healed, just like that. And I looked over at Mark, and he looked at me, and he said, oh, did anything happen? And I was quiet for a bit, and then I said, no. It happened so quickly, I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. Is this even possible? This couldn't have happened, you know. And then later I realized this is staying. I still got this. I'm good, you know. So I had that experience of being totally healed, and then I remember reading in the scripture about the 10th leper, that story where Christ healed 10 people who had leprosy, and he said, I'm doing a prayer blessing for you to be healed. Go to the synagogue and tell the rabbi you've been healed. And on the way to the synagogue, they were all healed. And then the one leper realized he was healed, and he ran back to Christ, and he fell at his feet, and he said, thank you for healing me. And Christ said, well, were there not 10 healed? Where are the other 9? And I identified with the 9 people who left and didn't come back and thank God for the healing. And that was what motivated writing the book, you know. And I want to not be the one that just goes back to his life healed and not saying how it happened. You know, I want to give credit back to the source of all goodness. And so that was my motivation for many years to write the book. It just took a lot of years to actually work on it and do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an excellent book. The stories are short, but they're just packed full of experiences like that. And they're very profound and just packed with miracles. I mean, the little book of miracles is exactly what it is. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the story, The Day I Died and Came Back to Life?
That was a period of grief that lasted about a year. I was in the Missouri State Penitentiary at Jeff City. They called that prison the bloodiest 47 acres in America, and it earned its name. There's a lot of people being murdered there on a regular basis, and if 1 or 2 people weren't killed a week, that was the anomaly. It was less than that. You know, it's like if you went 2 weeks without anyone being killed, the prison would just be filled with tension, because everyone knew that people are getting strapped. Gangs are getting strapped, and they're getting ready to go to war with each other. When people aren't dying, that means the tension isn't getting, off. And you just feel the tension rising, and then a whole bunch of people would get killed in a short period of time, and then the prison would go back to normal, And but I had been put in segregation for attempted escape, which I did not do. And I did a whole year, 1 exact year to the day, in segregation. For that, I'd filed a lawsuit to make the prison show even 1 iota of evidence that I'd done anything wrong. They couldn't do it, and the day the judge was going to hear my case, the prison let me out of seg, and I'd been filing to be released from segregation, not just the findings of facts that it didn't happen, but what I wanted at the end is to get out of seg. So the moment they freed me from seg, the case was moot, and it just went away. I didn't know enough about the law to know that would happen, or I'd have filed it differently. However, while I was locked up, my friend Bill, the one that got me into the racist movement, he and I were really good friends, you know. And I loved this guy. It was a platonic love. We weren't gay or anything. And it's not about any of that judgment. I'm just giving you a picture that this is the first human being that I really viewed as a friend that I loved. And I would have gone down in a blaze of knives to save this guy. I had a lot of courage. I didn't mind putting my life on the line to save this guy if I had to, you know. And the chief psychiatrist of the prison, or the chief caseworker, not psychiatrist, of the prison, was, I found out, orchestrating some things behind the scenes, you know, and he's messing with me a lot. And Bill, not just us, but, you know, they made a point out of us because we were very resistant. You know, when they locked the whole prison down, I was like the second or third person they locked down as being the most able to drum up a riot, you know, so. But what the guards would do is they'd bum rush us in our cells, you know, and they'd come in and they'd take our legal paperwork, and sometimes they'd bring it back, sometimes they wouldn't, and it's really hard to continue filing lawsuits if you don't got your paperwork, right? So, and then they'd separate us, put us into different cells, and they just kept screwing with us over and over and over and repetitively. And then one day, they came and took me out of the cell. Just suddenly, 2 guards came, and I said, "Come on, you're coming with us." Took me out of the cell and brought me over to the other side of the cell block, which is where they had the hole for death row. That whole side of the cell block was just for them. If they got in trouble over in death row, they'd lock them up in their own, you know, hall. And the 2 guards were walking me back there, and I had never been back there before, and I wasn't sure what was going on. And then the guards said, they opened the cell, and they said, "Get in that, go in." So I walked in the cell, and then as I suddenly smelled this pungent odor, and I looked around, and I realized that the entire cell was covered with urine, you know. The mattress was soaked with urine. The walls had urine all over them. I had one little dry spot in the middle of the cell that I was standing in. And as soon as I realized it, I was going to run out of the cell. Just then they shut the door and slammed it, and the 2 guards walked away just in a normal conversation. But then the lieutenant was standing back looking at me, you know, a little ways away from the cell at an angle, you know. And he was looking at me and he was sneering. You know, he's going, "Shh, shh, 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 shh." That's the exact noise he is making, just looking at me. "Yeah, I got you now, huh?" You know. And I just thought, you know, this is beyond the pale of acceptable. And I hesitated for a moment, and I thought, I'm saying it. I said, "Lieutenant, here's the deal. There's, you know, a couple of things you can do. You can leave me in the cell, or you can let me out of this cell. But if you leave me in this cell, I'm going to let you know now, this is your warning, okay, that someday you're going to be walking around a corner somewhere, and you're going to find a piece of steel buried in your chest with my hand on the other end of it. You're going to let me out of the cell or face that." And I knew that if I said that, it would put my life in jeopardy, because they had killed people before. I wouldn't be the first, but I thought, I'm not staying in the cell. They can kill me if they want. But I'm not going to just stand in here and take this, you know. And he just stared at me, and he had stopped laughing. His eyes were wide and unblinking. And it was obvious to me he was afraid, and I was glad, because I wanted out of that cell. They brought the guards back, and those guards looked nervous now. They weren't back into their daily grind conversations like, "Oh my God, you just told the lieutenant that you're going to kill him someday," you know. So they took me out of that cell, and they put me into the hole which is the ultimate place for death row people. If they're acting up normally, they put them in one of the cells that I was just in.
Mm-hmm.
But the end cell was the deepest, darkest cell in the entire prison. It had 3 doors on it. The inside door was regular, cell bars. The outside door was regular cell bars, but the inner one, the middle one, was a huge, thick piece of steel, solid. And so when they shut those doors, you know that you're in a cell. There's no light in the cell. You can't see anything. And but I thought, thank God I'm not in that urine-soaked cell now. So I was okay with that. But then after a while, you lose you don't know what time of day it is. If they felt like feeding you, they'd feed you. If they felt like giving you a mattress, they could. Sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. And so, and I just got to the point of being so grief-stricken that missing my friend, I felt like he had gotten hit by a Mack truck, because it kept separating us, and this time, for whatever, it's just like the being in seg so long, it just makes you raw in a way that's indescribable. It just messes with your brain, And I was just grief-stricken, and I just laid down on that cement block and crossed my arms over my chest, closed my eyes, and I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to. It's not like I wanted to commit suicide. It was way deeper than that. Mm-hmm. Wanting to commit suicide would have been like a breakthrough of the light of day. It would have been refreshing. I was way deeper than that. I just didn't want to be here, and I was so grief-stricken. There was nothing. And as I lay there, my physical heart stopped beating. My spirit rolled out of my body, and I stood outside of my body, looking at my physical body laying on that slab, and I realized I had just died. And this is my spirit standing there. And then I just said one word, really loud, with a lot of conviction, because I just realized that I had been manipulated into this deep place of grief by people that orchestrated this. And I just thought, no, I'm not going out like this. And I just said that one word. Just said, no. And it would take too many stories to explain, but there's this, when you're in that spirit mind, there's this echo that goes back into that spirit place, and my word no just echoed backward. And then my spirit went back into my body, and it hit my body so hard it rocked my body, and then my heart started beating again, and I jumped up off of that little cement bed, I started pacing back and forth in the cell, just back and forth, and it's like I've got this new resolution, I've got this new, it's like there's no way I am not giving these people this power. And I learned a couple of things. One, it crossed my mind that when Christ was up on the cross, it gave it some credibility what they said about it. At the end, he said, it was written that he gave up the ghost. To thee I commend my spirit. He gave up the ghost, and his spirit left him, and he died. He wasn't killed. He gave up the ghost. And I realized that I gave up the ghost. I didn't do it like him. He was much more, there's no comparison, but I just knew that one thing, it's like, wow, that's what that means. We don't have to kill ourselves. We don't have to take a razor blade and kill ourselves. We don't have to string ourselves up, none of that stuff. All we got to do is not want to be here enough, and we are out of here. And if there's a human being still on both feet, their mission isn't done yet. They want to be here. There's some part of him or her that still needs to be here. to finish up their work. So as soon as a person really, really wants to die, they don't want to be here, they're out of here. And there's not a lot of stories where people come back from that. All the near-death experiences I've read weren't like mine. I didn't see the light. You know, my body died and I left, but I wasn't close enough to really supposed to be going there yet. I guess that's why I didn't see the light, you know.
Right.
But I learned that piece. And the second thing is, it didn't matter what they did to me anymore. It didn't matter if they came into my cell and took the Valentine's Day card off the shelf and throw it in the toilet and urinate on it like they did in the past, you know. For my cellie, they did it my cellie's Valentine's Day card. They took it off the shelf, threw it in the toilet, and urinated on it. It had to be in guards. They're the only one with keys, you know. So, and they were constantly doing things. But you know what? I didn't care anymore. You can do what you want. I didn't care about money. I didn't care about if they took all of my personal things. All the things that they had to hold power over me or to affect me, it didn't matter anymore, you know. You can be as rotten and as scummy as you want to be. Guess what? Not my problem, you know. Not my monkey, not my circus, you know. And so that's a lesson that never left me. And in fact, now I try to figure out, well, geez, you know, money means something in this world. You want to make a living, you better think about it once in a while, you know. And at this point, I've got cancer and I'm incapable of working. And but I can still speak some, you know,
Right.
and I can still write. It's very difficult to sit, you know. It's like right now, sitting is extremely difficult, but I have a specially made cushion, but I'm hoping I'll be okay, you know, so. But yeah, that's the deal, man, you know. Miracles happen, and most of the miracles that happen in my life, I didn't specify, all right, here's what I want, do this. It wasn't like that. Sometimes they happen and I didn't even think they could, you know. I was skeptical, but now I'm the incomplete skeptic. You know, I'm still a critical thinker, but I'm not a cynical thinker. There's a difference, you know. And so I hope people will buy the book, and it is available on Amazon. If they order it directly from me, it's going to cost a few more bucks because I have to put postage on it. But it'll be signed, you know. But if you don't want a signed one, just order it on Amazon. And pretty easy to locate. So.
Once again, the book is called The Little Book of Miracles, Stories from the Incomplete Skeptic by Timothy Cameron. Timothy, thank you for the great
Yes,
stories.
sir. Thank you
God
so
bless
much.
you.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Thanks for having me.
To read more of the stories, again, the book is available on Amazon. And how much is it, Tim?
On Amazon, it's $17.99 at this point.
$17.99 on Amazon. So very affordable. This book will enrich your life if you buy it. So thanks for watching City Talk.